Serendipity is finding something unexpected, finding something that you didn't know you were looking for, right where you don't think you're going to find it. And this Denver trip has been that, meeting somebody that I share so much with, and I never even knew her. And her story's not only going to impact you, it might just change you. We're on the road to recovery in Denver, Colorado. And I want to introduce you to my new friend, Stacey.
My addiction, as I go through my recovery, more becomes revealed. When I first came into recovery, I really thought that my addiction started at 32 years old. But the more that I've really dug into my story and I've done the work and I've become more transparent along the way and more honest along the way, at this point in time, honestly, I would say 13. I had run away from home and I went in the middle of the winter. I went up northeast to run away. Like, that's not where you go in the middle of the winter. I had no money. I emptied the coins out of my penny jar, basically, and that's what my plan was to go find a friend in Missouri. And at that friend's house, I smoked pot for the first time. And I just remember at that moment, I didn't know what it was, but I remember at that moment that I felt like I had arrived. And of course, I ran out of money and I had to come back home and face the consequences of that, and wasn't really excited about it, but I knew that I could come back home and find more of that relief through friends and other mind-altering substances. And that's what I did. But I brushed it off in my 8th grade, 9th grade, and halfway through my 10th grade year of it being just a high school experience. That's what teenagers do. You party, you drink, you find as many drugs as you can, and you create as many stories around that addiction as you can, because that's what was really cool. The more stories you had about not knowing how you got home, and the more stories that you had about how much you could really drink and how much you could really drug, the more cool you really were. And that's a point in time in a teenager's life where you, I think, are discovering who you are and your identity. And so my identity became wrapped up in being, the party girl. And there was this duality inside of me, though, that knew that it wasn't what I wanted. And that duality came from watching my father, who was an alcoholic, and he actually, passed literally in a bar, sitting in a bar drunk. He was 88 pounds. And, I watched him kind of in and out as a kid, trying to get this recovery thing, but he was what you would call a very low bottom drunk, and very depressed. And to me, that's what addiction was. That's what alcoholism was. And so when I was in my addiction in high school, I didn't think that was me, because I still had it kind of together and I was young. So the duality, though, came from that. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be my father and end up going to a bar at 50-some years old, completely drunk and probably not remembering my last 10 years of my life, and falling off the bar stool. And because of the low quality of life that led to, he got so much brain injury from just falling off a bar stool that most people would have been able to survive. The neurologist said we can either do surgery and see what happens, but because of his low quality of life, may or may not make it through, and if he does, what kind of life will he have after that? Or we can let it go and he's just not going to survive. And so my brother and I had to really kind of like choose that, decide, do we save Dad and try and do this, let the surgery happen and see what happens, or kind of let it go. And that's a decision that, I've had to come to terms with. But, we let him go. He was a suffering alcoholic, and he suffered for a long time. And that's what the duality, that's where that came from, was I'm not going to be like that. I can control it enough to not be like that. So I had the ability at that point in time to be able to put it down and get a job at a gym and find my way through fitness, and that's what I did. And then I got together with my kids' father pretty young, and we had my daughter when I was 19, and that's what I thought was going to put me on the good road. As long as I can accomplish things that are on the outside and on the surface, then I'm okay, and I don't have to pay attention to this voice inside my head or this discontent feeling inside of my soul, which was, something's missing and I don't know what, and I'm not happy, and so baby's going to solve that. And then I ended up leaving that relationship when my daughter was 18 months old and went back out. And I thought it was okay. I thought I was okay. I thought leaving my family and going back out to become a Coors girl and passing out promotional prizes at bars and drinking again and having white t-shirt contests and getting involved with methamphetamine was okay. I really thought that was okay. I thought staying up nights at a time, as long as I didn't have my daughter. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying this. I thought all that was okay, and I wasn't okay. And I don't remember what, but the duality came up again where I didn't want to go down that road. So somehow, some way, I pulled back out enough to get back together with my daughter's my daughter's father, and then we had my son and got married. And then at this time, I thought, I'm gonna save a bunch of other kids from having to go through what I went through. The father not being around, the confusion of the family dynamics, the in and out of, going back and forth between a Colorado home and a Texas home, and, just the example of, and the confusion of the trauma behind not being guided. And I became a foster parent again, because as long as I can do things right here on the outside and not be persuaded by the ways of the world and my addiction on the inside, and not talk about it, and not tell anybody that really I actually could have been happier dying, then I'm okay. So after about 6 years, I cared for over 200 foster kids, and I did a really, really good job. And my then husband did it with me, and so I together we bought a home that would house over 15 kids at a time, and I loved it, I really did, but still inside I had this just uncomfortable feeling about who I was, and nothing on the outside was really helping. And so eventually I burned out on that too, because it was just more accomplishment on the outside, and I left again. And this time I left, and I left hard. I went into the fitness world and became consumed with being a pro athlete and being a fitness model. And in order to keep up with that, I had to be in front of a lot of people all the time, and it felt uncomfortable, but as long as I could have a drink here and there, and then prescription drugs came in, and there was a tumultuous relationship in that too, but I'm not going to get into details, because the fact of the matter is this was about me. And as long as I had enough bottles of pills around, then I was going to be okay. But eventually that took me to a place where I abandoned my kids and I left the state. And eventually that took me to the place where I became homeless, and I was jobless, and I still thought I was okay. I isolated myself to the point where I didn't, I moved into an apartment where nobody knew I was. I sold my car and got a different car so nobody knew what kind of car I had, so I could stay in that isolation. And through the abusive relationship, I actually sought out pills for that refuge. He convinced me I needed the pills, so I kept taking more pills, but then my addiction just concaved. I imploded to that, and I overdosed. Took a whole bunch, a handful of, I don't even know what, the rainbow of pills, Xanax, benzos, opiates, sleeping pills, and downed a whole bunch of alcohol. And by the grace of God did my brother find me in the middle of a snowstorm, and I was placed into a treatment center. And then for 2 years, I struggled admitting that I was an alcoholic and an addict. I struggled with having an addiction. I struggled with admitting it because I I was okay. I could think my way out of it. So I went in and out of programs, and I still was trying to convince myself that I was not an alcoholic, I was not an addict, that everything else was, that all of the problems I was struggling from, the homelessness, the not being with my kids hating me abandoning my kids, was all because of somebody else or something else. Blame, 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 blame shift everywhere. And I couldn't get it that it was an inside job. I didn't understand that my addiction was an inside job. I didn't understand that finding recovery was an inside job, and it was all about lining up my thoughts, my beliefs, and my actions with something better. And I had to become honest with myself. And that was hard because the ego wants to fight for itself. The ego wants to survive. The addiction wants to kill you. And it was convincing me that I was better off dead. And my kids knew that I tried committing suicide through taking pills. And I traumatized my kids so much that there was no way I was going to be able to, my addiction came out and said, there's no way you're going to be able to make this up with your kids. You've traumatized them so bad. You're a bad mom. They're better off without you. The guilt and the shame was eating me from the inside, and all I wanted to do was to have relief from that. And eventually I got to a place where after 2 years of trying to find that recovery, I told my then sponsor, I'm not an alcoholic. I told my then sponsor that I wasn't an alcoholic and that I needed to come out. And we can be friends, but I got this. And this is, again, when I'm still without a job and without a home, and my kids, I have no relationships. And about 6 months later, I went in for a surgery to have a hernia repair, and I got prescribed, and I was drinking during this time. And even though I was drinking and I couldn't stop while I was drinking, I still wasn't an alcoholic because I was at least trying. I enrolled in college. I'm on the right, again, accomplishment. I enrolled in college. There, see, I'm trying. I have federal loans now. I'm going to college. I'm a college student, so I got this. So the drinking still doesn't matter because, listen, I'm a college student now, right? I'm getting on my feet. Everybody look at what I'm doing good. And then I had a surgery and got prescribed some opiates. And I took a day's worth of opiates, and it was on. It was on. It was, I think it was like a 3, maybe 4 week prescription, and I had taken in 2 days probably half of that. And for the very first time, and I don't know how, all I can say is it was a spiritual experience. All I can say was, that God was there. And I finally felt that I didn't want to die for the first time since I was 13. And I had a choice to take those pills or to get up, and as hard as it was to sit up because I had a hernia surgery, get up and get out of the house and go to my friend's house, my sponsor's house, my ex-sponsor's house. She had just had a baby who's 2 weeks old, and she was getting her hair done at her house from another woman who was in recovery. And I had no idea. And I walked in and I just collapsed in front of them and I said, help me. Something's really wrong. For the first time, I knew something was really wrong with me. I still didn't know what, though. And they got me on the phone with their sponsor then. And she was in the middle of a fundraiser raising funds for her grandson who had a brain tumor. And in the middle of this fundraiser that was happening in a week and a half, she stopped everything. I mean, raising funds for a huge event in a week and a half that was happening, she stopped everything. And she stayed on the phone with me for 4 hours with me doing this, saying, I don't know what's wrong, but please help me. For 4 hours, I stayed on the phone with her, and that's when I finally, that same relief that I would get from drinking, that same relief that I would get from drugs, that same relief that I would get from those insidious, hateful thoughts of myself, it was almost like I was addicted to the thoughts. I was addicted to hating myself. I was also addicted to not wanting to be here, and I was addicted to the pain. For the first time, I got that same relief from her. And from being able to say, I've got a problem, and I don't know what it is, but I know that there's a better way, and help me. And from then, I knew, I was like, I'm done, I'm not going out anymore, I don't care what I have to do. And I sat on my hands, and I stayed in the rooms of AA. I stayed going to church. I stayed on the phone. I read the big book. I meditated, I prayed, and even when I didn't feel it, and even though those negative thoughts, and even though the hateful thoughts and the shame and the guilt and the remorse would come in and pound me, I mean uppercut me and jab me all day long, I kept telling it, you're a lie. You're a lie, and you're not welcome in my head anymore. And it took a really long time for those boxing matches to go from almost every hour of the day to then every couple hours of every day to then just a couple of times in the day to every other day to a couple times a week to just weekly to, and now it's just, my disease I know is there. And someone once told me this, your disease is out there waiting for you. It's doing push-ups. The second you pick up anything, you're done for. And it scared me, but it didn't scare me enough to go, I get it. I don't fall for scare tactics too much because I'm not scared. I'm a person who wants to die. Fine, whatever. Scare tactics don't scare me. But when I got it and I was about a year in, I was like, you know what? My disease, my addiction might be out there. Getting push-ups and getting stronger and doing, running marathons, but my recovery is doing pull-ups and running triathlons right now. It's good as long as I'm lined up spiritually and I got my God with me every single day and I armor up with him. The first thing I do in the morning is say, I'm all yours. You do with me what you will. I have no expectations. I'm good. I'm okay. I understand now that my addiction is a spiritual malady. It was a bankruptcy. There was just that empty spot that I felt since I was a kid was because I didn't have a God, and I was very confused, and I was shown examples of different religions that, put this stigma inside my head that I didn't think I could ever understand. And now the more that I stay close to other people in recovery, the better I understand. I also know that it's in my head. I also know that my head wants to play games with me. And I also know that my body craves that stuff.
Sometimes it's hard to talk about the past. Sometimes it's hard to talk about what you did in your addiction and how bad it was, and stigma of society on addiction. We judge addicts from a societal standpoint like they're bad people and they're dirt and they're just worthless human beings. And I understand that. I understand 70% of society doesn't understand addiction, but many times this stigma is self-imposed. We look at ourselves. We find it hard to even talk about the bad things that we did, but facing it is what helps other people, and it's what helps us grow in our recovery. And obviously from this story you can see that, but the story's not over. There's a new chapter, and Stacey found recovery.
This life, I'm here today with brand new friends, and I would have never been able to have that before. I would have never done this. I would have never sat on camera and told my story. I wanted to bail out so many times, actually, before I got in front of the camera, and I just gave it to God, and I said, just say what you need me to say, because I know there's someone else out there can benefit from the story somehow, some way, and because stories saved me too. I kept listening to people's stories, and I thought, if they can get it, I can get it. And it gave me hope. And so this is the life of recovery, and I love it, and I don't want to die today. All I want to do is be the best that I can be according to each day, and I don't look any farther. I'm not looking at dinner right now. I'm looking at right now. Oh, yeah, so here I am. Okay, so I graduated college, so that moment of relief, that big breath of when I finally found the same, but even better, when I say the same relief, it's better because now I take accountability for my own life. I take responsibility for my own life. I make my own decisions. I don't have other people make decisions for me and then blame them when it goes wrong. I make my own decisions now. It's nice. That's the one thing is recovery has given me the ability to say, hey, this is all about you. What do you want to do? You want to go this way or you want to go that way? And so when I finally got that, I finished school and I graduated with a bachelor's in communication. And I did communication because I knew I was going to be talking about this somehow, some way, and I still don't know how that's going to happen, but it'll evolve. It doesn't matter. All I know is that I had that feeling and I went for it. And I'm doing that now, but I then graduated and found a job in the oil field, but I knew that's not where I wanted to be. And I got a call from a friend who I had done an internship for at CEDAR, which is the Center for Dependency, Addiction, and Rehabilitation. I had helped them redesign their brochures, and he had said, do you want to come on board and help us with some social media? And I said, sure. And so I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I quit my then job as an office manager, and then came on as a subcontractor and helped them revamp their Facebook page and their Twitter. And then I saw an opportunity to become the admissions supervisor, and I took a shot. Nowhere on this planet would I have ever done that before. Nowhere on this planet would I have actually said, hey, I want a shot at that. But I knew that's where I needed to be, because I knew that I could pick up the phone and I could hear other people's struggles. I could hear other people's desperations, and I could relate to that. And I could tell them that it's going to be okay, just hang on. And just take my hand for this moment. And the same thing that I did with foster kids, except I work with adults now. So I'm the admission supervisor at a drug and alcohol treatment center.
And not only giving back, but encouraging people to find the path you found.
Yeah, yeah.
What's that like, being like a journeyman, like, helping other people find the path that you found?
What's that like? Indescribable. How do you describe that? It saves my life. It helps me remember exactly why I do what I do, and it's called grace. It's called turning your story of shame into recovery, and using it for others. Using it for others. My story has a purpose now, and it's the more I'm in it, the less I hear the voice of shame, and the more that I hear the voice of purpose.
So often, I try not to let things affect me, and I try not to find that core of someone else's story and how it affects me. But obviously, through Jesus Christ, we share that path, that journey, and the person who carried us through those footprints was Him. And so I hope that this story has not only affected you, I hope you're going to share it with other people who are going through this, because if people like Stacey and me and many people that we've shared with through the road to recovery can't find our way, can journey to find recovery, anybody can. We're live from Denver, Colorado, and we'll see you on the next episode of On the Road to Recovery.